As we talk about cellular wellness this month, let's make the connection between our food and cells at the cellular level. Hi, I'm Dr. Peter Minke. This is Minke Wellness. And what is our food? I mean, we talk about the 4 food groups, right? What are those? Fat, protein, sugar, and fiber, right? Four basic macronutrients, right? I'm sorry to say 4 food groups, but I mean, I know you're probably thinking I was saying meat and, vegetable, whatnot. Fat, protein, sugar, and fiber. What are our cells made of? What a shock. Fat, protein, sugar, and fiber. We can talk about fiber in a slightly different context. So I'm going to stretch it just a little bit there, that analogy, but don't beat me up too bad on it. Okay, so let's look at the cells, right? If we eat good fat, guess what we're going to have for our cells? Good quality fat. If we eat good quality protein and all the necessary amino acids, guess what we're going to have for our cells? Good quality protein. If we eat good quality sugar, guess what we're going to have for our cells? Good quality sugar, etc. So you can see how this goes. When we look at the cell, what part of it, I mean, we can actually literally directly link up what's happening in the structure of a cell and the food that we're eating. So let's make that connection, and then I'm going to do a little breathing to see how, I'm going to share with you how I combine the breathing of what we did way back. Remember, way back in the digestive system, we talked about breathing and really absorbing those nutrients. Now I'm going to link that to our cellular structure, and we're going to do a little breathing on that, okay? So let's have some fun. All right, so our cells, on the outside layer of the cells is the membrane, okay? So the membrane itself is made of phospholipids, right? So, and that's a fatty layer. So if we eat bad quality fat, junky fat, it's going to damage our cellular membrane. So if we talk about the good quality fat, and if I were to breathe in, if I just ate a meal, okay? If I haven't just eaten, Ron, you're going to have to do this when closer to when you eat, or go eat a snack. Anyway, I'm going to breathe in, and I'm going to pay attention to the fat, okay? The fat in the food that I'm eating, okay? Hopefully it's good quality fat. If you want to go eat an avocado, this will be helpful. Eat a little tablespoon of, or teaspoon, whatever, of coconut oil. This is going to be good quality fat, right? And so I can connect to my body to the good quality fat, the fats that's in my nutrition, and then the fat that's in my cells. So I'm going to invite with breath, right? Inhale. And I'm going to imagine that good quality fat, that wonderful creamy fat that I've just eaten, okay? And I'm going to invite that to come in and move through my lymph system and move into my bloodstream and move out to my cells and create this wonderful, creamy, smooth, a beautiful cell membrane that's going to become part of me. Now, here's the trick. If you've eaten bad quality fat and you try to do this little breathing exercise, you'll probably vomit. I'm not kidding, because when you make that kind of a connection and you go, okay, really, I'm going to invite that fat, and you don't have any good quality fat and you've been eating partially hydrogenated crap, then you are going to have this reaction. Your body's going to go, no, get that junk out of here, okay? So be careful if you decide to do this breathing and you have not been eating good food. So let me just warn you, by now, hopefully, you've made all these changes and you're eating better quality food. You've gone up in quality, right? This is really not what's on the menu, it's what's in the ingredient list. It's quality that matters for your food. So we're going to breathe that fat in, absorb that fat, bring it in, invite it come into the lymph system, invite it to come into the bloodstream. Those are the 2 places that will carry the fat particles, right? We have the triglycerides, fat that makes it. This all get processed in the liver, so we can make that connection. We can connect it to the liver, have the liver fire up, right? We have to fire up the furnace. Remember the breathing we did for the liver? Fire up the furnace of the liver, get that liver to emulsify the fat, invite that fat into the bloodstream, carry it to the cells, and imagine that healthy fat coming into the cells, coming in, and you know what? Your nerve cells and your brain cells, very, very important to have that healthy fat. So we're particularly going to send it to the nervous cells, the spine, spinal column, and the brain. And we're going to bring in that healthy fat, and we can just feel that milky goodness coming in and soaking through and saturating and creating a healthy membrane for the cells. wonderful, fabulous. And by the way, that membrane is also covering the organelles of the mitochondria, for example. So the muscle cell is very important. It's also covering all the cellular machinery inside, all the processing machinery, and then it wraps the DNA. It wraps the nucleus. That's the nuclear envelope that it protects the DNA and holds the DNA. So you feel all of that, let that go all the way in. Okay, so now sugar, good quality sugar, right? And so we need those essential sugars, right? We need the different kinds of sugars, so we get that when we eat a wholesome sugar source, okay? Something like the agave syrup that we did for the immune system month. We have just even maple syrup or molasses, or even unrefined sugar, not quite as, by the time we get to cane sugar, if you ate really truly authentic cane sugar, like that's where molasses would come in. But typically brown sugar, let me just warn you, brown sugar is typically just caramel colored white sugar, right? It's no longer the true molasses containing original brown sugar. That doesn't exist anymore. So unless you can find that in a specialty store, but generally brown sugar is just basically white sugar with brown color added to it. With caramel color added to it. Okay, so just wanted to, if you haven't been following me all along the way here. So let's feel the sugar. I'm going to invite that sugar in. Guess what, though? That sugar is going to create a glycemic index, a insulin response, okay? So I want that sugar that we've just eaten gently, and if this is carbohydrates that are being broken down, that's even better. The complex carbohydrates will break down into sugar, but we want that to happen over time. We don't want to have a sugar rush into the bloodstream and create that glycemic index spike, create that sugar insulin spike that then creates an increase in inflammation, an increase or decrease in growth hormone production, decrease in the immune function. We got a lot of different problems that come with a sugar spike. Okay, so we don't want to do that. We don't want to flood the brain with sugar either. We need to make sure we have a balanced response. So we're going to breathe in that sugar. And where is the sugar in the cells? What part are we going for? Well, we're actually talking about, most of these are glycosylated proteins, sugar that's been added to proteins that are also on the surface of the cell as cell signaling molecules. And then we also have sugar, ribose, for example, and deoxyribose that are present for our DNA. So we really have sugar as a lot of different little building blocks, little different parts of the cell. And so we're going to go ahead and invite that good, healthy sugar that we have in our food. It's in our stomach. And it absorbs, we actually start absorbing it right in the mouth, but we're going to absorb that sugar as down low. It's the pancreas that's kind of participating in that. And we're going to absorb it in the duodenum, and it's going to come into the bloodstream. And we're going to do that gently and slowly, but we're going to send that beautiful, wonderful sugar, and we're going to call forth the goodness of what nature has brought to us, right? We're actually eating wholesome foods, right? If we're not eating wholesome food, this doesn't work. But we eat that wholesome food, and we call forth all that goodness. And that sugar comes in, and we're going to invite that into our cells to give us healthy cell signaling, healthy DNA, all those things, all the goodness that comes, saturating our cells with that. Okay, protein. We need amino acids. We need these for different body functions. We've talked about in the nervous system. The amino acids are needed for neurotransmitter production. But basically, we're talking about protein. We're talking about the structures of the cells. And this is both signaling proteins that are embedded in the envelopes, the nuclear envelope, the nuclear pore proteins, the proteins that hold the DNA, the scaffolding proteins. We have proteins that are involved in cell shape, involved in cell movement. Your muscles are all in actin and myosin proteins that are being produced, acted on, so all these proteins. So there's a lot of proteins involved in the cell shape, cell structure, and then also the cell signaling as well. The same thing like the sugar we just talked about, the proteins are also involved. But this is kind of a deeper, more formidable element of the cells. It's also, if we go to the connective tissue, we heard collagen and elastin, and those are protein molecules that are outside. That's the extracellular matrix. So we go to those parts of the connective tissue, and that's the collagen, that's your bone structure, your ligaments and tendons, and your cartilage and bone in particular. That's going to have that protein that's being produced outside the cell. So if we eat the correct kinds of amino acids, we're going to flood the machinery with all the basic nutrients it needs to do the work of the muscles and the bones and all of that. So that's really a large part of where the proteins are coming in. So we're going to breathe those in. We absorb that, predominantly break that down and absorb it in the stomach. And we get those amino acids to come into the bloodstream. And we send those amino acids to be picked up by the cells and be used for the meaty part of what the cell is doing, right? The bulk of what the cell is doing. Okay, so we breathe that in, invite those in. Now this last part, fiber, I'm going to stretch it a little bit. Like I said, in the fiber, when we talk about fiber in the plant material, we're often talking about sugar chains. These are polymers of sugar, like cellulose, that we don't use, we don't break down. And so when it comes to digestive fiber, those actually end up in the colon, as a broom, so to speak, to trap and sweep out, and that helps the toxins leave. Not really quite the connection to the cell in the same way that I've just been describing, but inside the cell are what's called fibers, intermediate fibers, cytoskeletal fibers. These are the skeleton, the structure. Just like in the plant where the cellulose gives structure to the plant cell wall and gives the cell its shape and structure and integrity, the same thing inside the animal cell for these what's called intermediate fibers. These are made of proteins, not sugars, but let's go ahead and just stretch that connection anyway. And we breathe in and we make that connection to this cellular structure of the plant that we've eaten, and that's part of that whole fiber system. But we breathe that in and we make that connection to the cellular structure, the fibers inside the cell. Animal cells they don't have such as rigid as a structure as plant cells do, and these fibers are a little bit more flexible, but the cell does have a lot of structure, a lot of cytoskeleton, a lot of skeletal fiber structures, intermediate fibers and microtubules. Those are very clear protein arrays, actin, and other kinds of fibers that are in there that gives the cell its shape. So we're going to breathe in and we're going to enhance the integrity of the cell shape, those little protein fibers that make up the skeleton of the cell. And we're going to connect to the diet in that way. And what I'm bringing up here, as we bring in the nutrients of our food, I'm making a connection between what we're eating and where it goes, what it actually does in the body. This will help you make better food choices if you come to this level of consciousness at least a little bit. I'm not asking that you make this every single time you eat every little morsel of food, you have to make that connection to that it's making your cells, but it is, whether you are aware of it or not. So it's usually better to have a little bit increased consciousness and awareness about the quality of your food, especially as we go into holiday seasons and we end out our year. We don't want to have to start the year in a wellness hole. So let's just enhance our awareness of food. Invite all the beautiful, wonderful goodness that comes from nature in the form of our food, not in the form of these adulterated, plasticized, preserved, chemically laden junk that oftentimes the modern food supply has readily packaged and made available to us in forms cheaper than what we can get the natural forms. Isn't that weird? That preserved, processed stuff is often cheaper and more easily available than the authentic stuff. So we're going to invite all that goodness in the food, all that nature has to offer, and invite that into our cells to make our cells what they should be: healthy, vibrant, glowing, active cells that know what they're supposed to do, that behave correctly. Happy wellness.